Слышно, да? О, даже меня слышно. Классно. Ну, всем добрый день. Поговорим чуть-чуть про 1С. Как в мире 1С себя чувствует Postgres. Вижу тут несколько знакомых.
Good afternoon. Let's talk a little bit about 1C. I hope you will hear a few new things. And also I will tell you about 1C-Battle results. The results were quite unexpected, so by the end of my presentation I will tell you about it. We have a lot of time, 45 minutes. I will try to be faster, so you will have more time for your questions in the end of my presentation. Could you please raise your hands who works with 1C? Okay, so the rest of you just came out of curiosity what is going on in the world. My name is Anton Doroshkevich. I came from Novosibirsk. The weather is actually much better in Novosibirsk, quite surprisingly. So, my condolences about the snowfall. Let's start. What's the first question we have in 1C when somebody suggests Postgres? It's free. Yes, it's free, but let's compare. In 1C world, the #1 database is Microsoft SQL. In the future, I will call it just a famous database. So let's compare who is the leader and who is the hero of my presentations. What they have, what are the constraints. Well, first constraint, Microsoft SQL can use only one core. Second constraint, only 4 gigabytes of RAM. Third constraint, only 10 gigabytes on HDD. And in Postgres, there is no such constraint. I'm not talking about 2017 version because it's not yet supported by 1C. Well, next constraint, only Windows. And in Postgres, you can use both Windows and Linux. And fifth constraint, it's zero downtime. You can maybe take a backup. That's it. And in Postgres, you have replication, physical, logical, cascade replication, whatever you need. So this is about the free of charge. There is almost no difference between standard version and enterprise version, just an older brother. So it's the same Postgres. What's so good about it? It's very easy to switch between servers, graphical UI, and database administration can switch easily who is master, which server is master, and then switch back easily. So this is quite user-friendly, using graphic UI. What do we have in Postgres? Cascade replication, so logical replication of the whole server, which is quite unusual for 1C users. And even if you read the manual, there is no distribution between base server and server. It's basically the same. On one server should be only one database. For 1C world, it's uncommon. This is purely ideological constraint. And otherwise, they are the same functions. Postgres supports as many as you need. Usually it's not more than 12, but you can have 16 if you want. There is no limitation. Next, graphic UI of the internal manager, scheduler. This will appear soon in Postgres, but it's already possible to perform just using scripts. It's quite painful to switch to scripts, but then when you understand the system, it works fine. And the third part is profiler on Microsoft server. And on Postgres there is log file, and then you can parse it as you like. There are many options, but such thing as profiler doesn't exist. It's not something negative, it's just something you need to get used to. There are lots of filters. You can apply them to the database separately, because for Postgres there is no difference how many databases there are. And one more painful feature is differential backup. In Postgres we have PG Pro backup. This is also not common for 1C. MS SQL doesn't have it. And as far as I know, Postgres professionals, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think in the version 10 it's in standard build. Well, anyhow, they promised us that, so it's in both versions, standard and enterprise versions. In 9.6, for example, it exists in standard version. Also, one more thing. MS SQL is free, but Postgres Professional Standard is not free. You can download it for free and you can start it for free without any constraints. But if you read license agreement, it says only for testing and learning. So if you want to use it for production, you need to pay. So Postgres Pro Standard, which in Russia only this software can be used in government. And they must, if they want to use it, they must pay, and the governmental institution, they don't have the right to use anything else. They can use only this one. So what's so unique about Postgres, what MS doesn't have at all for 1C world? It's table spaces. It's quite useful, very transparent. You can distribute data, and adding 1C will accept it, and you will be able to work with it without any problems. And also restructurizations of 1C database. You can create a separate space and put there full 1C database, not just one table. Then restructurizations will go well, but if you just put one table, then after restructurization this table will be moved to the space. So you need to keep that in mind. The separate table will be moved. Okay, now my story of one production on 1C. 1C plus PostgreSQL. It's 300 databases of 1C, 4 terabytes of data. We had to use it because of the budget, as this story about the cloud infrastructure. We had to pay to the producer of the famous database a certain amount of money per the number of cores. So we used cloud systems, but all the producers want to get agent remuneration. So every quarter we had to pay. So we decided to have a look, what is this Postgres system? People told us that it works, and despite the fact that we were quite professional with MSQL, we had to study Postgres. So the first release was built on Windows Postgres because it was quite scary for us to switch from Windows to Linux because it has to be installed, and for 1C world it's something fantastic situation. There was no information in the internet, in Linux communities. On Linux forums we were not able to get any help. On the forums, this is a feature of free distributed software. There is no help from the community unless you have some personal connections there. As we have asynchronous mirror on the MSQL, here we had to understand replication, not because it's complicated, but just because it was unclear and we were not used to it. So all the documentation was in English, so for 1C there were lots of barriers to move. So we installed it, it worked, but when we moved to Postgres server and installed 10 1C databases and started to use them, and just more than 15 simultaneous sessions happened, we encountered a problem related to the operation of file system in Windows. So the problem is that Windows doesn't allow to rename the file. Postgres cannot rename the file. It gives an error. All requests freeze for 15 seconds. And on 1C console, you can see like a tree, there is a huge queue. Even the background applications cannot get any information from the database. And for a long time, for about a couple of months, we could not understand what was going on because it was a black box for us. This platform, nobody knew the source code. It's all written on C. It was completely unclear where to look. And then we understood that the problem is related to the connectivity with Windows. And a couple of months ago, my colleagues from Postgres sent me a corrected file rectifying this problem in the source code, but unfortunately we still don't have the final build where we could test it. So hopefully it will happen soon and this problem will go away under Windows. So when we encountered this problem, it was not clear what to do, what was happening. The database just shut down, and then in 15 seconds it came back operational for some more time until the next error, and then it would shut down again. So for a couple of months we tried to understand what was going on. We started long tests, just how to install Postgres on Linux. It was completely unclear what to do. Everything was uncommon. Some packages black and white letters, and nothing was clear what you installed, how to delete this, where it was installed. It was completely world upside down. For Windows users, it's completely not clear. Then we found like a task manager, and we were able to see at least something. And then it was not common for us. We didn't like Ubuntu. We had some experience of operation of IP telephony on Cisco, and we knew at least something about it. So instead of going inside this black box, we used this operation system because we knew it at least a little bit. We installed it, checked it, it worked. We ran 100 sessions, it worked, no mistakes, no errors. Well, then we moved further, and as it's a cloud structure, we wanted to have two replications online. We tried Cascade Replication. It worked. Two replications worked simultaneously, and then we were surprised to discover that we can download backup copies from the replication, which we didn't have on the Microsoft SQL at all. So we were quite pleasantly surprised using this free system, and it's not just working, it even makes our life easier. So we don't have to move the copies from one server to another, we can just download it. Everybody was happy. But still, in the vanilla version, this issue is not solved. We can do only full backup copy, and there is no other solutions. It's a big problem because in 1C world we're used to make often backups, and it's quite difficult to store such a huge volume of data. But then we were again pleasantly surprised by PostgreSQL when we understood that we can indicate the list of tables. We didn't know in Microsoft SQL that such a miracle can exist. So in order to make a backup for testing environment, it was quite fast. If you have 80 gigabytes, for example, of attached files, you will be able to download the database very fast, and it's very convenient and it works. We were quite pleasantly surprised that this free database is working, because based on 1C experience, even if something is written in the manual, it doesn't mean that it works. So we were very surprised that it worked, but that's what happened. So then we moved to release 3. What we had to do, there were several databases, 300 plus, and the number is growing constantly, so we had to write Postgres databases backup solution. When we create a copy in real time, successful or unsuccessful, and again there is this minus that in 1C MS SQL there is such thing as checking of backup copy. In Postgres it doesn't exist. So what we did to somehow help us to check for errors of backups, we created errors log during backup, and if the size of this log was 0, it meant that there were no errors during the dump procedure. But this is not 99% guarantee, but I'd say at least 80% guarantee it gives. This is not particularly convenient, to be honest. I know that it can check up to which point you can roll back, what is where. But again, correct me if I'm wrong, if during dump there is an error, the dump file is available. There is just a text file with inserts, and it's very easy to create an error. We can, for example, set a very little interval, and we need 1 hour, for example, and in 60 seconds backup will stop. So this file will not be 0 size, it will be there, and backup will show you that you will be able to restore from this backup. But actually this is not true, because replication stopped with an error, and we would never know about this if we wouldn't analyze the errors log. I'm not a database developer, so I can only tell about my wishes, hoping that the developers will find convenient solutions for this problem. So we wrote something ourselves. It's not a complete solution, but it works, and at least we have some information. So in third release, we created monitoring, and apparently you need to track different parameters, even more than on MS SQL. There is no mutual blocking, for example, which happens quite often on MS. Here it was 0. We were quite surprised. We've been downloading for quite some time, and nothing, 0. So again, we were surprised it worked. I will tell you more in detail. We had a disaster, an emergency. Our Postgres server shut down, and even though we had Cascade Replication without testing, the rollback 1C still worked on replication, and our clients didn't even notice anything. There was just one time freeze, and then it went back online. But we thought, when we will restore the working server, how to go back to this server. So we started to think, and I will tell you what we did, and then I will explain that we shouldn't have done it. Well, anyway, this is the scenario. We had a Cascade Replication, everybody was happy, working server, and then replication, and another replication. Then the working server shut down, then we restored it. What to do, how to go back to this server? We decided that maybe we can download the replication again, just what we could understand quickly from the documentation. And we had to delete the data from working server. We thought that we need to delete this data folder and to make a full dump from replication to the working server. So basically we had to create the replication, the working server from scratch. And it takes hours, tens of hours. It's actually a very long process. And if something goes wrong, then you maybe will have to do it for the second time. So then we decided to set up the former working server as a replication server. Then we delete, switch, move the file to the working server. Replication switches off. We delete the data folder from replication. And then all these terabytes go from the working server to replication. And then it's like a replication from the working server. So it was a nightmare, terabytes of information. We had to stay overnight, and but we have Cascade, so again, we need to delete the folder to move the data, to set it up as a replication from replication. So it's a complicated chain. We moved all these 9 circles of replication setup. Then it started to work, but we understood that for the clients it was rectified, this error, during 1 minute, but for us it took like a week. And then apparently we shouldn't have deleted the data folder from the working server. We should have installed unlimited storage. So when the working server goes back online, you just set up that the replica is on another server, but it should store all the data from the working server. Even if it's hundreds of gigabytes, it's fine. In some blocks you will have to go back to those blocks again. Some of them you can skip, so there are options. So basically this is what we had to do. Unfortunately, this error is not described in the documentation, how to go back online on the working server from the replication. So this we understood only in the process of testing. So maybe hopefully they will describe this in the future. So now the dessert. As I promised, some data, very unexpected results. This is performance testing, comparison with Postgres Pro standard, not enterprise. Honestly, when I was invited to the conference to make this presentation, I thought about this idea. I crossed my fingers and I was hoping maybe if it will be at least 10% slower, then it will be just great, perfect. And with this feeling we started. What we cooked our dessert from. We took not a monster server, because of course the difference would have been smaller because of the powerful hardware. So we took quite a standard hardware for 1C database. I don't know if I should describe it in detail. You can see it from slide. Just pay attention that the file system is not NTFS. We were hoping that that error with global stat will not appear, because Microsoft promised that this is a revolutionary system, everything is great. I will tell you later if it appeared or not. So what else? Postgres is Windows. I tried to make this test honest. So as Postgres supports officially Windows, so we decided to make testing on Windows. So this is the same server, same software, same operating system. So now the database itself. This is one of the latest versions.
So it was not the latest one, but it was not the oldest one as well. Maybe it was issued 1 month ago. The volume of the base is 1.2 terabytes. It's quite big for 1C. It's a working base. I mean, it's not about the reports. People really work there. About 700 to 800 people work there. They work there continuously, and all contours are used. Everything works. So the base is loaded. And what did we choose for the load testing? We selected the favorite procedure of 1C users, restoration of partitioned accountant for 1 month. It can last for days on very good hardware that cost millions of dollars, and still this procedure takes several days, from 3 to 4 days, to restore the sequence. And what are the indicators? We took the period where we had the sampling of more than 100,000 documents in order to have a good sampling, and the number of batches is more than 1.5 million for this month. So maybe experienced developers think that these figures are small, but for 1C these are big figures, because there are lots of registers here. And what else? We used Windows 2012 R2. We did not use 2016 because we're afraid of launching this on product. And I would like to mention drives. These are quite ordinary drives. No SSD, no cache on CCD, quite normal drive, RAID 10, and cache is 512 megabytes. So I'm not hiding anything. Memory was 8 gigabytes for everything. Not specific memory, but just the memory that was present there. And 8 cores. And for this test, to be honest, we decided to do the following. We decided to use this big data, 1.5 terabytes. But you know, they say that a big database cannot be inserted there in DT. But actually it can be inserted in DT. And we conducted the first test. DT was 39 gigabytes. I'm not going to explain you why it happened like that. People who use 1C understand why it is like that, and people who do not use 1C will not understand it anyway. So you won't need it. So firstly, what did we do? And how long will it take the program to load it back? And the first test confirmed our fears when we hoped that Postgres will be a bit faster. But actually, MS is 82% faster. It downloaded this base in 19 hours, and it took 34 hours for Postgres to download it. So it took much longer. It showed 2 results, in sync on and in sync off. All experienced users of Postgres say that if sync should not be turned off, but we decided to try it, and we turned it off, but it did not help. 10% difference, but a risk of data loss, a big risk of data loss. That's why please do not turn off fsync. It's a very important thing. And actually, you cannot accelerate this process the way you want to do it. If you search on the internet whether 1C is slow on Postgres, the first recommendation is to use fsync off. But actually it does not work. 10%. The result was 10% and the risk of data loss. And actually we were quite upset to get these results. But still we promised to conduct this test, and that's why we launched the restoration of partition accounting, of batch accounting, sorry. There was typical code, and the results were not calculated correctly. They were calculated half year backwards. Now, it's quite typical for customers to forget calculating results. To forget to calculate results, sorry, and the typical code that is present in batch accounting sends huge queries to the database. So it returns a lot of lines for every query into a temporary table that is an enemy for Postgres if we did not turn off Patch Online Analyzer. And after that, we have this big table with several millions of lines. And we get a lot of lines. And it starts recording batches once again. We know that Postgres does not like temporary tables, so we were ready to lose in this battle. The results were as following. 1.1. Postgres is quicker. Despite a lot of time that was spent on the test, 18 hours, 48 minutes. We did not believe that it was like that, but still we conducted this test 6 times. And the result was similar every time. It is not much quicker, but we were surprised that having a lot of data in temporary tables that are not common for Postgres, still it worked. Everything is okay. When we move to the next scenario, change the code. So we take an expert in 1C technology, give them the configuration and tell them to repair it. Have you seen the load on the drive? It's too much. It shouldn't be like that. This person actually thinks for a month, then works for 2 days and managed to repair it. And results were similar in figures. But here we do not touch the results, but the code was changed. What does it mean for the database? It means that now we have not 1 million of lines for every transaction, but about 100 of lines. And the results are fantastic here. We have checked it 15 times. We could not believe that a free, Postgres Post Standard, as far as I know, Postgres Post Standard actually could not be characterized by quick speed. And actually common Postgres and Postgres Post Standard are quite similar in this respect. So common Postgres will have similar results. And please remember that Windows was used for this. We did not use Linux. So everything was quite customary for 1C users. They even managed to understand something in this process. And as a result, when we optimized the code of queries and the number of information that is returned to us into the temporary table in case of select was much less, Postgres can cope with this task even better. Its growth is really huge. It's three times faster. So for MS it was 18 hours, and for Postgres it was. So for MS it was 10 hours, and for Postgres it was 6 hours. So good queries are very important for Postgres. So the system is quite demanding to a programmer, but it can also be very beneficial. And the best test, we take a perfect customer whose 1C support service worked in an appropriate way and calculate results for a closed period, and we get a changed code with correctly calculated outcomes. And here is the result that we get. So it is twice quicker MS is twice quicker, but Postgres is also much quicker here. So just 20% quicker. And we conducted one more test, because here it doesn't take long, that's why we could conduct several tests. In a different room, we've had a presentation about auto vacuum, and they told us that it should not be turned on because everything will be bad in that case. Well, it can be turned off for one day. It's okay. But if you have a sanctioned, a scheduled insert of a lot of information, and you know that it will end in 2 days, you can turn it off, but still you are to control it. So after the data was downloaded, you are to turn it on once again. So what do we get? Auto vacuum was on, the result was 2 hours 50 minutes. So you know, one of the most popular recommendation is to turn off auto vacuum in case the program is slow. But you know, the result was even worse. And I did not know what the previous speaker would say. He said that the result would be worse, and it is worse. We checked it in practice. So, you know, in 1C we like updating our records, and this is work for auto vacuum. That's why please do not turn it off. And what result did we get in the battle? 3-1. I use Postgres in 1C for 2 years. I still like the database. Well, you know what database I mean. And the results were quite unexpected for me. Of course, here we are to attract 1C experts, because typical code is correct as well. You can get a correct figure. But if you want to have it faster, then you should use a good code. No, it's quite logical. We know that you should not address administrators, you should use 1C users. 1C users did something wrong, you should address them. And we got similar conclusions. That's why I would like to congratulate Postgres professional team. You have done a very good job. So the latest platform is really good. It suits Postgres. The interpreter of code provides better queries, and the library of standard subsystems is much better now. Even the problem with RLS is gone. In the past, when you switch on RLS, the database will be off. And now, on Postgres, everything is done very quickly. It goes to the credit of 1C users because they corrected the code. And we are to solve one single most important problem. I don't know who will solve it. 1C users or Postgres specialists. 1C does not close the network. It never does. While your customer is connected to the base, 1C server will not close the session. It holds it and sends a query to it. Select one. So this is a question to platform developers. Did they have such restrictions? For MS, that is okay. It does not care how many users are connected to it. And regarding Postgres, we know that if it has more than 100 networks, it's no good. And for me, it's quite okay, because in my cloud I have lots of users. Hundreds of users, maybe even thousands of users, but I also have a lot of bases. and I can distribute these bases. And when you have one big base and 600 users, what can you do? So you will have to switch it into transaction modes, and it will have similar number of connections on server, just like 1C server to Postgres. No proxy of Postgres database will help you solve this problem. Today, it's one of the biggest problems of 1C use. Well, in that case, client will receive a message. Well, yes, just imagine. Accountants will be quite scared to see this kind of message. Well, yes, maybe you can have a timeout, but you should solve this problem in cooperation with 1C platform developers. They can see that you use Postgres, and in that case they will do something in a different way. This is the biggest problem for 1C users. So that's it, actually. I invite all of you to use Postgres. Everything works, everything is cool, but big installations in terms of users for one base. So you cannot distribute this base. Okay, any questions? Yes, we have tested it. Okay, can you come to me during lunchtime? Because here we're speaking about databases. Unfortunately, the speaker is off the mic. I agree, but at first we had to set everything correctly, and after that we had to search the internet. So at first you set everything correctly, and after that search some recommendations on the internet. Well, of course, in that case you will get a result, because it doesn't really matter. You send it to operational memory and the transaction is recorded. But you should not have your base in one drive. And if you turned off transaction recording on the drive, well, that's really bad. Can I ask you a question? I'm sorry, I did not see it. Speaking about versions, 1C versions 8.2 is not used, 8.3 only. Well, I've seen no use in using this outdated version. You can get to the newer version, and speaking about this enterprise management program version, compatibility is 8.2, I don't remember. Well, there were problems with times tab because 1C had its own format of type. Look here, 8.3 platform, and configuration has compatibility with 8.2. So this program is like this. Compatibility is still there. And if we speak about modern configuration, even EMP, well, it works. It can work on Postgres, just like on MS. Sometimes it's even better. So tests will be quite similar, but there is not such a good example with hundreds of thousands of documents. And one more question regarding Postgres version. There is standard version and enterprise version, and the tests were conducted on standard, yes. And in prod and in production, what do you use? We use standard. Look here. Standard is paid and enterprise is paid. Officially, 1C supports enterprise only. So if we speak about transition, then you should use enterprise, but due to data, due to more compact data, maybe it will be even faster. Well, we did not conduct tests on enterprise. And on the standard one, test results were quite similar. Unfortunately, the speaker is off the mic.
Первый тест чего?
The first test of what?
Не, все видно.
No, Windows was used. In all cases, have we done it?
Делали ли мы? Да,
Well,
делали.
yes, we have.
Да, я вам отвечу. Цифры точно
Yeah.
такие же.
I can answer this question. Figures are similar until you turn on multi-streaming, until you turn on 40 streams, well, more than 15. Speed is similar, so nothing is different. You won't get plus 20 to your speed. It will be similar. It will download one core or one set of query. The load on drives will be similar, but in case of intensive update or insert, in case databases are used intensively and one file is recorded for the whole server, Linux creates file copy, and Windows does not enable that. So the difference is multi-streaming. And speaking about speed, well, it's similar. Up to 15 streams, there will be no difference. And what about the number of users? Well, okay, one instance of Postgres. Oh, in one database on Postgres. Well, in cluster console, this is 450. These are managed forms. 1C retail. Well, you can talk to me during lunch if you want. I have a question. I have a laboratory system on Postgres with a patch, Postgres Pro. The version is 9.4, and now it has a bug. The bug is as follows. U letter is not in the index. I have not tested whether this thing was corrected in 9.6. What index? Well, when you have P3, I do not remember the type. Well, it's not full text search, no. Search using subline. So I wanted to know, in your version, can U letter be searched? So can it be searched? I cannot answer this question now. We need to conduct more tests. No, I just remember that in case of some distributions, it could not be seen in the index. Well, you know, I have never faced such an error during 2 years. And is it possible to track it? Because the status here is a mystery for me. You mean the status of bug tracker? So you can come to me later. I remember that we had such a bug, but I do not remember what version includes that. Yes, you can answer your question. Unfortunately, the speaker is off the mic. No, why? We just calculated the results from this base. The base is similar. It's not that I took a different client. No, just let's imagine that this customer is an ideal one. So we used the similar base for calculating the results. They were calculated half a year before this one. Are you 1C user? Well, in that case, you cannot understand what the term results mean. You can come to me closer. If you're interested in that, I can explain it to you. Results in 1C is a very specific notion. Thank you.